Hi, I'm Wayne Tuttle, and this is Chasing Legends. Welcome back to Chasing Legends. Wayne Tuttle, your host once again. Please hit subscribe, hit the notification bell. Check out our website, legendsofsuperstitionmountains.com. Leave comments. We actually answer each and every comment, or do that little thumbs up thing. But we get to them all. Sometimes it takes us a day or so. This week, it's a little different because I was going through the files. There was a story that caught my eye, and the story folder said it was the Navajo Canyon turquoise treasure in Arizona, and you can see that it's got a very faded heading. Generally, after I finish one of these stories, I put a new header on it for what I think I would be able to reference for the story or whatever I've named the story on Chasing Legends. Put it back in the folder. So I pulled this folder out thinking, well, I haven't done one on this, so this will be a pretty cool one. I wonder where in Arizona it is. Pull it out, it's not in Arizona at all, it's in California. And I'm reading the story, and I realize I'm pretty familiar with it. And I'm thinking, well, we did this one, but I didn't relabel the folder, which I do on all of them. So this must be the case that I liked the story, then another story, I had 2 or 3 of them, and then some other story jumped, and this one landed back in the file cabinet. I looked through all our videos. I couldn't find this story. So we will go with it today. If it is a repeat, I apologize. I could not find it, and I don't understand how. So it must have been something I referenced or I was looking at, and it just didn't make the grade at the time, which it's not a great story. It might have been there was a Superstition Mountains story or something that just jumped up in line. And then the folders pile up. I've put them back in the cabinet and start over of pulling out files. This story starts in the 1880s. It's a guy named Alec or Alex, known by both, Frenchman, from the Alps area. And he comes to America. He'd been a Legionnaire. And after he'd finished his service with the Legionnaires, or decided to leave the Legionnaires, I know there's a certain service and whatever they do. He survived through all that, came to the United States in the 1880s, settled up in Nevada, and it was during the gold boom up there. And he actually made a really good strike. And I guess it was the Comstock Lode, there was an offshoot of it, and he managed to get a lease on a part of it. And he profited very, very well, made about $30,000. But Alec Ramey had a problem. He liked to have fun, have a good time, dance, drink. He loved to sing these old Legionnaire songs. And so he went into town and made many new friends with his newfound wealth and started going through it, and then woke up one day and all his friends were gone and the last of his money was gone, and he felt stupid. Couldn't believe he'd went right through it like that and threw it all away. Kicked himself in the rear, went out, put his nose to the ground, went back out, started looking. His second time, not quite as successful as the first one, but hit gold again. Came up with quite a significant sum of money. Immediately went back to town, hit the saloons, found some new friends, went out with the dancing girls, sat there, drank, sang his songs, and then suddenly realized a few months later he was almost out of money and it was impossible, and realized everybody had been stealing from him and he was broke again. At that point he thought, fool me once, fool me twice. He was done with it, decided he needed to get away and go somewhere where people didn't know him. He wouldn't have some sort of like big town to spend his money in. So he headed west. Headed out in the Death Valley area in California. Heard there was some gold and some diggings out there. He gets out in there, and it's towards the end of the century. And he becomes really well known. I think they're the Shoshone. I can't remember what, the Timbasoo or something Shoshone are out in that area. And he becomes really well known by them. They like him, think he's a crazy guy. He's out there all the time, boisterous. He just walks in their camps, sits down, has a meal with them, sings his songs. But they take a liking to this crazy prospector out in the wilderness. And he becomes kind of well known to people, various people in the area and the groups, the Shoshones. But he enjoys the time alone. He has a couple burros. He does his thing. He's not striking it rich. He's kind of like starting to give up. He keeps checking an area, goes to a different area, but he learns the lay of the land. On this one trip, he's out in there, and he's moving along, and he ends up spending way too much time in one particular spot and realizes, I'm running out of water. So I need to get the burros. We need to move over where there's some water holes. He knows there's an area called the tanks. So he heads for the tanks. He gets over to them, and there's nothing there. They're dry. And at this point, he's just basically almost out of the water. He's got the burros. He's like, oh my gosh, this is not good. I'm out here. There's no place within striking distance. He also has rheumatoid arthritis, really bad in his feet. So he struggles to walk. So he needs to ride the burros occasionally and stuff, and can't carry much of a load on him when he does walk. So realizing he needs water, he knows there's some warm springs, some hot springs nearby. He goes over to them. The Shoshone use them for medicinal use purposes. And he gets over there. The water's kind of warm. There's not much there either, but he's able to get a little. He sets a camp, realizes he can spend a day or so there. He's not going to be able to replenish well, but the burros and him will have some water. He realizes he's got to call it. He's got to figure out a direction to go to get to a water source. He wakes up the next morning and the burros are gone. The burros, wanting more water than was there, must have just broke loose and taken off. And he realizes they head out across the hard pad, and he's like, with his bad feet and all, what do I do? So he grabs the couple water bottles he has that has water in them, a little bit of his camp gear, leaves most of it behind because he can't walk with most of it, and strikes off and realizes there's an area that's supposed to have a spring. It's quite some distance, but he's going to try to make that. So the next day or so, that's what he heads for. His feet are just killing him. It's he can barely walk. He gets to the one spring. It's dry. Realizes all hope's lost. He's starting to lose it. Can't believe the burros left him. And he's up there by this ledge area, and he's just sitting there in what shade he has, and he's breaking off these pieces of rock, and he's messing with them. And he figures, well, he'll look at them if he makes it out of here, look at them later. Sticks a few in his pocket, a couple in his pack. They're not very big. And then tries to get on his way again. And that's his last memory of that part of the journey. Because suddenly he wakes up and he's in a Shoshone camp. There's a Hogan nearby. He's near one of the areas of warm springs they use for medicinal purposes. His feet are all bandaged up. A couple of the Shoshone that knew him pretty well had been out and heard him across through a canyon singing and recognized his voice. And he was just completely lost, delirious, dehydrated. He was just like stumbling around and crawling and just bellowing these Legionnaire songs. They realized who he was, got him, were able to get him into camp, and he spent a few weeks there healing up. He healed up. While he's in the camp, he's got nothing really to do. He's getting better. His feet are feeling better. He looks at these rocks, and when he breaks them, it's just almost pure gold in them. And he's amazed at how rich this is. And he's trying to remember kind of where he was. So he decides, you know what, I'm going to try to get back to that area. I vaguely remember this area, where I was and how I was coming. I know where I'm at right now, so I think I can get back to that area. So he starts pulling it all together, and the Shoshone warn him. They say, you just need to get back to civilization. You shouldn't even be out here anymore with your feet and whatever, but you need to get back to civilization. He goes, oh, don't worry about it. He takes off, heads out across, again, runs out of water. This time he's saved by a gentleman known as Alfred Gerard, who was at that time a young sheep keeper. Gerard's out there tending his sheep, and this guy comes stumbling in, no water, nothing, and they start talking, and it turns out they're from the same part of the Alp area, and they both speak French, and they get on really well. But Gerard is telling him, you know what, I have no interest in this. I herd sheep. I can't leave my sheep. He said, I have to do my job. Ramey's kind of like, doesn't understand it, because like, there's this rich gold. But Gerard would say later is that he kind of like didn't have much of a, there was a lot of old prospectors wandering around out there always talking crazy about the gold they were going to get, but they never had any. He didn't know gold from a hole in his head, so he said he didn't know what the guy was really showing him. But they became good friends. Now, Ramey continues the search for for a few more years. As he searches, one of the places he goes back to is the ranch for Gerard. Gerard ends up becoming quite successful with his sheep herding, sticks to it. And he builds up a nice ranch, and around 1903, 1904, Ramey dies. But before he dies, he tells Gerard, if you're ever out there, he draws him a couple maps, talks about the area, and gives him a couple pieces of this ore and says, if you ever are interested, you'll do really well going out this area. Gerard says, thank you, but you know, I have no interest. I have a successful business. Ramey passes away. Gerard sits back and goes, you know what? I've done very well. It's been 10 years or so since Ramey died. He goes to look at this piece of ore again and starts breaking it up and realizes, man, there's just gold all through this. So he decides, I've done very well in life. Everything's fine. I'm going to take some time and go look for this thing. He gets some burros and stuff and gets one of his workers to go with him, and they go out and start looking for this to no avail. There's a man named Crescente Santavillas, and Gerard runs into him in a nearby town. And he knows that he'd known their mutual friend, Ramey. And they're talking, and Crescente brings out a piece of this ore too and starts talking about this story. He says, did you know this, that he found it? And of course, you know, it's like, yes, I have a piece myself. And they compared stories, and this furthermore got Gerard more interested in trying to follow the story. He decided, you know what, I'm going to get back out there. I'm going to search again, spend the next couple of years looking all over the area. Could find nothing. Finally wondered if this old man just had a piece of ore from the Comstock load off chute or something like that he'd saved. It was kind of fooling them. Maybe the whole story was bunk. So Gerard goes down and starts visiting with people that knew his friend, and he comes across this elderly Shoshone lady in a town, and he's talking to her and says, do you know if there's anybody from this group? And he knew a couple of the names of a couple of the men. And he said, do you know if any of them are alive? And she said, no, I'm sorry. None of them I do not believe are alive anymore. He said, that's a shame. And he told her who he was and that he's friends with Ramey. And she goes, I remember him. She remembered him very well for his songs he would sing and come into their camps and stuff. And she said, I healed him at the medicine, at the springs. We had to heal him. He came out of the desert. His feet were so bad and all this. She obviously very much liked him. With that, Gerard again realized there's truth to this story. He continued out. But to this day, no one's found that. There are maps that tell you the general area, but no one's quite sure where Ramey was when he found this ledge. So it's still out there for anybody who wants to do the looking and run across Death Valley, which Salvador Delgadillo, Bob Shue, so there's a bunch of guys that search for stuff in various areas out there on the hard pan. So it could be one of those guys are onto something, or maybe someone like you will just drive out that way and, hey, check it out. Anyways, I apologize if this story has been told before. Like I said, it's totally familiar. Could have been I studied it, got it ready all week, and then switched the stories, and that's my familiarity with it. But it is what it is when we come down to the end of it. I think it's a cool story. It's a nice little bit of a treasure, lost mine, lost ledge story out of California, out of Death Valley. I don't think you could ask for anything better. Remember to catch up with Sunsets on Amazon Prime. Remember, the Treasure Hunt of the Year Awards are March 15th at Goldfield Ghost Town up at the Mammoth. We will be having dinner for the treasure hunters and all them, but you're more than welcome to come up and take audience. It's a Saturday night. Come up, celebrate with us. Buy a few old Dutch hunters some drinks while you're there. Be a very nice thing. We'll be starting probably about 5 o'clock. So there you go. I hope everybody's well. I hope everybody has a great rest of the week and enjoys everything else we're promoting and putting out on the site. And until the next time, always remember, I'm Wayne Tuttle. You're not. And this was Chasing Legends.